All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me for this off night meeting. Hopefully this is good and it's well received. We'll do some more of these. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me. If you can't, please drop a note in the chat. Just one quick thing before we get started. Today is Giving Tuesday. On behalf of our friends at the United Railroad Historical Society, they are doing their U34CH campaign. They have a current goal of to raise $20,000 to help restore the U-boat, both cosmetically and operationally. So this will help with the first phase of that. Right now, we're at 65% of that goal. Every dollar helps. So if in the spirit of Giving Tuesday, if you have anything if you'd like to contribute anything, please log on to urhs.org. Thank you. And now to the show. So for those who don't know me, my name is Richie King, president of the Tri-State Railway Historical Society. Before I was ever involved with Tri-State, I've had a long-standing interest in trains. Became interested in the Rahway Valley probably when I was about 11 or 12. That was about the time that they were trying to restore the tracks to operation. I grew up in Union. Tracks ran all through my town. So it's pretty exciting to see, what was going on, the thought of trains coming back. And so as a young kid, we used to walk the tracks and see what was going on. And me being me, was curious about everything and why things are the way they are. I had to know more. So I started researching about this little railroad. And over the last 10 years or so, been seriously researching. And I've met a lot of cool people along the way, learned a lot of cool stuff, have found a lot of neat things, photographs, documents, just a huge pile of thousands of photographs and documents, and have been able to tell a good deal of the story of the Rahway Valley Railroad. It was a very unique railroad, a small railroad, a lot of tall tales, a lot of larger than life characters. It's just been really fun to research. So I put out a few books. There's still a ton more information to share. So that's why I'm doing this presentation tonight. So that's why I'm doing this presentation tonight, to kind of a lot of people collect stuff on railroads and, for one reason or another, don't like to share it. I don't believe in that. I believe history is worth sharing and spreading so people know the story of this little railroad. So I've accumulated so much, so I thought I'd periodically put together a little presentation on what I've been able to find and share it with everybody. So this presentation tonight is my best photo finds. Like I said, I've found thousands of photographs of this railroad all the way from the 1890s to the 1990s. And in this presentation, I have about 150 photographs, which are my favorite, which I call the best. Not necessarily because they're, belong on the cover of Life magazine or National Geographic, but because of what's in them, how I found them, maybe the stories that go with them. And some are just really awesome pictures. So that's what I'm here to share with you tonight. So before I give you a little overview on how this show is going to go, I just want to share background on this picture. This picture is taken by David T. Maney in 1951. This is right around the time that the diesel came. So this is down at Aldine, the interchange with the Central Railroad of New Jersey. Quite a lot of cars that day. So I'm not quite sure if these are inbound, if this is being dropped off, set out, or picked up. But if they are being picked up, it had to be shoved back all the way down towards the Lehigh Valley Bridge. They'd have to hop over to track 6. Before 1949, they actually had to call XC Tower to get permission to foul track 6 before it was downgraded. And then they'd throw the switch and pull up onto the Rahway Valley. But a lot of cars for such a little railroad. They did a great deal of business. So this is kind of just how the presentation is laid out. So first I'll take you some through my rare finds, how I found them, how they came to me, the stories that go with them. Everyone's favorite color steam, slide photographs, basically every color photo I have of steam on the Rahway Valley. Um, Early diesels, more 1950s color slides. Again, everyone's favorite era for slides, the 1950s. I have the Walt Switz collection of photographs, and I also have Walt Switz here with me. I'm sure he'll be very happy to talk about them. Over the years, I've encountered a number of photographers that have photographed the Rahway Valley. Dick Fullerton, Hal Carstens, John Krause, William S. Young, all took pictures in the 1940s and 50s. So I'll be sharing pictures of those. Rich Taylor, Paul Carpenito, Tom Namath, and Dan McFadden, who have all had the chance to correspond with, generously provided their photography, which I think is really great. And at the end, just for fun. So just some cool, neat, quirky pictures that I just happened to find that I think were kind of funny and cool to share. So first, rare finds. So I classify as rare finds as something that I've never seen before. It's really hard, it came to me in a weird way, or really early, or just things like that. So this picture is of Rahway Valley number 8, taken in the 19 teens, somewhere in Kenilworth. So the first book that I ever encountered at the Rahway Valley was written by Don Maxton. It was probably my first serious introduction to the history of the railroad. So I really thank Don for putting that book together. That's because that's part of how I got interested. And I noticed when I was going through the books, there's pictures of, number 11, number 12, 13, 14, 15, but there's no information. There is nothing about number 8. Don probably never came across it. I didn't come across it until Ben Bernhardt put out a book on the Thurlow Haunton collection, and this picture is in here. So this is probably I classify as the first rare find I ever found. The first time I knew anything about this locomotive was in that book. So it's the first picture I ever saw, and for the longest time ever saw of this particular locomotive. So I started getting more serious. I got pretty brave and started sending letters out to people. One of the first letters I sent out to someone who I thought might have some information to share was Tom Tabor III, who sadly passed away a little bit earlier this year in his early 90s. So I'm really happy to have gotten in touch with him and correspond with him. So Tom Tabor is well-renowned railroad historian, done tons and tons of research in his time, did the Lackawanna books. But he also had folders and portfolios of other little railroads. So rather than write me back, he sent me his whole portfolio in the mail with all the pictures he had of the Rahway Valley. And in this portfolio was this picture, which is of New York, New Orange number 1, the first locomotive owned by the railroad. So the New York and New Orange was the predecessor to the Rahway Valley. So this picture is supposedly taken in Roselle, which would make sense because the CNJ originally had their roundhouse in Roselle. So I'm assuming this is where the locomotive was dropped off. And if you actually look at the number plate, it says 322, which was its Pennsylvania Railroad number. So this was the first locomotive that arrived on the railroad in July of 1899, and it came to me. This picture came to me from Tom Tabor. So finding out more about the railroad's roster came through not only Ben Bernhardt's book, where there was some roster information, and I found out about numbers 9 and 10, which were just basically listed in Bernhardt's book as 060s from the Pennsylvania Railroad, but didn't have a picture of them. I didn't see a picture of one of those until I got Tom Tabor's portfolio, which had this picture of number 10 taken in 1921 in front of the Kenilworth station. And ever since then, since I first found that copy of the photo, I found tons of copies of this photo. It just seemed to have come out of the woodwork that every railroad historian seemed to have a copy of this particular picture. So as I got more and more into the Rahway Valley in 2013, me and a friend just happened to tour the Rahway Valley, took a bunch of pictures, and I got the wild idea to kind of start a website of what I'd found, took pictures and stuff. And I got an email from a lawyer in Garwood, New Jersey, named Michael Kaplonsky, saying he had a friend, Jeff Jargish, who had been collecting stuff on the Rahway Valley for years, and was interested in getting together. So we got together. They were quite surprised to find that I was only 19 at the time. And we've been friends ever since. I'm actually in Mike Kaplonsky's law office right now presenting this to you. So it's just a great way. Met a ton of great people, and they're awesome guys. But this picture came from Jeff Jargish's collection, and it's probably his favorite picture in his whole collection. He actually rescued this. It was about to be thrown out. This is probably the first picture that Jeff probably showed me. This picture is taken in 1943 at the Lehigh Valley interchange in Roselle Park, and shows the crew. So the Rahway Valley, at least in the steam era, their crew had an engineer, a conductor, a fireman, and 2 brakemen. So in this picture, from left to right, is Frank Frote, who's the engineer, Tom Mangini, who they called Happy, which was kind of not his demeanor. He was the fireman. The next guy is Alan Rambo, who is the brakeman. George Davis, who is also filling in as brakeman. And on the far right is Harry Williamson, who is the conductor. One of the next pictures that Jeff shared with me was this picture of the Corson Brothers wreck in 1951 on West Webster Avenue in Roselle Park. We actually were fortunate enough to meet the guy whose head is peering over the truck. He was the fireman that day. His name was Bobby Heft, and shared with us some information about what happened that day. They were coming up from the Lehigh Valley interchange and stopped for the crossing. And at the same time, there was this tree surgeon's truck there also at the crossing. And then apparently the driver of the truck misread whatever was the flagman was doing, who was Jack Jenkins. And both the locomotive and the truck approached the crossing all at the same time in slow motion. Before anyone realized what was happening, they had a slow motion collision here, which succeeded in attracting a small crowd of people to the accident scene. So Jeff had found this picture, I believe, at a train show, and we didn't know too much about it at the time, but we slowly found more information about this, and more and more pictures popped up about it. Turns out that these pictures were taken by William S. Young, and he had made some copies and shared with some people, and that's how they ended up in circulation. And then through a donation of paperwork from John Nolan, we actually found a letter from George Clark to the Corson brothers, who owned this tree surgeon's truck, and apparently the Rahway Valley paid him a settlement for the damage to their truck. So just cool photographs, how they came to us, the stories that kind of developed over time. Just really neat. This picture also came from Jeff. Just a really cool shot of 15 meeting a Lehigh Valley passenger train in front of the Roselle Park station in Roselle Park. Just a really, really neat shot. Not too many pictures out there of Rahway Valley steam meeting steam of the other railroads. So in my next phase, I kind of started reaching out to libraries in the towns that the Rahway Valley served. So one of the libraries I reached out to was the Springfield Public Library. And I forget who I got in touch with, whether it was the librarian or an assistant or something. But they said they had a collection of photographs, and I was more than welcome to come down. And in the lead up to going down there to meet with them, they said they had found some stuff and they had it set aside for me. It was all in a digital archive. And when I got down there, they said, yeah, we found some stuff labeled Rahway Valley, but we also found some other railroad pictures that just said railroad. Well, the first picture she pulled up was this picture, and I about fell out of my chair. Because this is New Orange Ford Junction Railroad number 3 coming out of Roosevelt Park off the Lehigh Valley. So this picture is taken about 1902. So the New Orange Ford Junction, the history of the railroad was it was New York and New Orange. They went bust. Then it was New Orange Ford Junction. They went bust. And then it finally became the Rahway Valley. So pictures of the New Orange Ford Junction, it only existed for 4 years, are just really rare. And this lady had no idea what she had shown to me. And then after she showed me, Jeff and Mike showed up not long after, and they also fell out of their chairs. So as I was getting more and more into it, I had met Rudy Garbely of the Garbely Publishing Company. He had just started his publishing company, had talked about doing a Rahway Valley book, and basically told him I could do him one better and write his book for him. So he had interned at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania and had some connections there, and went to the archive there and was able to scan the Rahway Valley collection. I didn't go with him. I guess I had some scheduling conflict or something, but he uploaded the pictures that night for me, what he had scanned. And I think the first picture I saw was this, which I also fell out of my chair because this is the Rahway Valley Summit Station. And it's probably the only really clear picture of what the station looked like really early on. It was a small little building with a canopy over a platform. This was right about after they finished construction in 1906. All the tracks are backfilled and ballasted with cinders. It shows the original little freight house that was there. The fact that there was a runaround here, this crossover, and shows that there was a driveway carved out behind the retaining wall there to get to the team tracks that were to the left of this picture. And today, if you go to 270 Broad Street in Summit, you'll still see that wall there up against in the weeds, which is the only indicator that this was ever there. So also in that batch of Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania photos was this picture taken about 1907. So one of the main things that people had written about over the years about the Rahway Valley, and one of the first things I ever knew, is that when they built to Summit, they wanted to connect with the Lackawanna, and the Lackawanna wouldn't let them. Well, there was no better picture that I have ever found that illustrates that they wouldn't let them connect in this picture, because they got across Broad Street in Summit, and that's as far as the tracks went until 1930, when the Lackawanna finally let them connect, which is about 24 years that this was like this. So the track stop, none shall pass. And also in the background, you can see the original Summit water tank up against the mountain. Again, going into the Railroad Museum collection, this is again a new picture that they had been shown to me of number 10. So in 1922, the railroad needed a new locomotive. They had these two 060s, number 9 and number 10, which really didn't serve them any purpose. They must have been rough on the tracks with no leading truck, and were pretty light for the grade up to Summit. So they traded them into the General Equipment Company in Paterson, New Jersey, to buy number 11. So this is a picture of number 10 after it was traded in. And from a roster that I got out of the Steamtown collection, found out that the General Equipment sold it to a construction company in Louisiana, and then it eventually ended up on the Seaboard Airline. So just cool information that was able to be pieced together. Another picture from the Railroad Museum. This is number 7. So from paperwork that we later found out from John Nolan, the Rahway Valley, this was their only new locomotive they ever bought, steam locomotives that they bought. Bought it new from Baldwin in 1908. Used it in passenger service until 1913. And after that, they used it in freight and passenger service. And after 1913, the Rahway Valley absolutely hated this locomotive because while it has a trailing truck. It's on the same frame as the driver's and has a very long, rigid wheelbase. It has a more rigid wheelbase, longer wheelbase than some of the 280s that the Rahway Valley later had. So it was always hopping off the tracks. It could only get like 4 loaded cars up the grade to Summit. It apparently its brakes were awful. So this picture actually shows the locomotive in freight service. You can see a pole up on a pilot for pulling cars, cable wrapped around the pilot. So while these guys are smiling, they're probably cursing this locomotive. So the locomotive only lasted for 4 years in freight service before they sold it to General Equipment Company, and eventually ended up at Watervliet Arsenal in upstate New York. And this is it here at the General Equipment lot in Patterson after the Rahway Valley sold it. Another picture from the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. Just an awesome, awesome collection of photographs. Just really, really rare stuff that came out of them. This is another picture that I just about fell over. So the first book that was written about the Rahway Valley was written by John McCoy. So John McCoy in 1976 for the bicentennial wrote a book called Saga of a Short Line. And he talks about in the early part of it's a little pamphlet really. And he talks about in the book that on the first day that the train came into New Orange, which is what Kenilworth was called at the time, the train met a crowd of people who all waved to the train as it came in on its first day. Well, I found out later that there was some stuff on the New York and New Orange and the town of New Orange in the Rutgers Library. So me and Rudy went down there. They'd also just received a large collection of photographs called the Thurlow Haunton Collection, which we also wanted to look at. But there was a book, little pamphlet brochure about New Orange. And in that pamphlet was this picture, and I just about fell over. This is the picture of the first train coming into New Orange on August 1st, 1899, to the crowd of people, which probably doesn't number more than 15 to 20, which in John McCoy's book makes you think it's like hundreds of people. No, it was just like 15 to 20 people and their horse and carriages just pulled up. But still a very cool picture nonetheless. In 2016, 2017, let me back up first. I had written into a guy named William S. Young in 2009. I was 15 years old. I had learned from Tom Tabor that he was an avid Rahway Valley fan, had taken lots of pictures, was planning to write a book at some point. So he gave me his address and I reached out to him. He wrote me back, confirmed that he was indeed planning to write a book. But because of that, he couldn't share any pictures with me. And that was my only interaction that I had with him. Well, in 2012, Mr. Young passed away. His photograph collection was supposed to go to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. Then it was supposed to go to Steamtown. I was trying to keep tabs on it. But apparently there were some caveats in Mr. Young's will that these public museums couldn't accept them with these restrictions. So the family opted to sell his railroad stuff. So I was invited up to Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, where Bill Young had his farmhouse. Filled with tons of cool old stuff. Me, Jeff Jargish, Mike Kaplonsky, Rudy Garbley all went up. And it was in the middle of freaking nowhere. We drove out of town. The cell phone service stopped like immediately at the town line. And they could have been leading us to the middle of nowhere. And it was. I went to this house, all the electric and water was turned off. It was freezing cold. But they showed us the Rahway Valley collection of photographs. They had number 13's builder's plate. Later found out and went back, got number 13's brake handles and number plate. But as Mike was poking around the house, he noticed an album of photographs, which wasn't with the rest of the Rahway Valley stuff, and in was this picture. in amongst other Rahway Valley pictures. So this is a picture of number 8 that we almost didn't come home with. Might have ended up who knows where, if Mike hadn't poked around in that other room. So this is number 8 in October of 1916 on the CNJ. The building to the left is the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company of America, which is where the Romarovsky plant later was, which was just recently torn down. So just really by chance that we even walked away with this picture. Really great photo of number 8. Also in that album of photographs was this picture. We knew that the Rahway Valley had a rail bus. And that was about it. We had some, there was a documentary film, if you want to call it that, done about the Rahway Valley years and years ago. And there was like a really crummy copy of this photograph in there. And then through Young's notes and what we found out later through other documents and this picture we got out of Young's collection, found out that this was a Kelly Springfield bus, like an actual road bus, that the Rahway Valley converted for rail service, and it was an absolute failure. Later found out there was not one, but 2 rail buses, which is a really interesting story to put together. And George Clark in later years classified these rail buses as an experiment and a rank failure. But this is really the first like real clear photo we ever saw of this. Somewhere along the line, Don Maxon reached out to me, who had written the Arcadia Rahway Valley book, and said he had photocopies of some photographs that came out of the Neese family. So Carl Neese had been the Rahway Valley master mechanic. He worked there from 1910 to 1948. So that was really intriguing. So I met up with Don at the diner. He showed me these photocopies. Again, I just about fell out of my chair. It was really early stuff, pictures of numbers 8, 9, 10, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s pictures. So I ended up finding the Neese family. Carl Neese's son, John, who used to hang around with him at the railroad, had passed away, but his widow was still with us at the time, Edna Neese. I got in touch with her. She was about in her 80s at the time. Really, really sweet lady who lived down in Virginia. And she said, of course, no problem. Her daughters and grandchildren came over and helped her scan the photographs and sent them up to me. So I didn't just have the crummy Xerox copies. I had the actual scans, the actual photos. So these the next few pictures are those photos from the Neese collection. This picture is really cool. It's of number 12 in operation. Number 12 only ran on the Rahway Valley for about a year. So pictures of it under steam are really, really rare. The locomotive was just way too heavy for the Rahway Valley, and the Rahway Valley just never had the money to upgrade their infrastructure to handle it. The Rahway Valley comfortably operated locomotives in the 70 to 75 ton range. This was 87 tons, which on 70-pound rail was quite a lot. This is a picture of Carl Neese from his family on number 10, probably taken during around World War I time. Around that time, he was an engineer on the Rahway Valley. The Rahway Valley actually operated two freight crews during the war. So I'm sure numbers 9 and 10 were involved with the second crew. The American Can Company at the end of the Rahway River branch was a very busy customer. They made ammo, and actually during the war they had a fire, and Carl Neese had the presence of mind to run a locomotive down there and had a car filled with ammo and gunpowder or what have you, out of the way of the blaze. So just cool picture of Carl Neese. Another picture of number 8, the crew coming out of the engine house at Kenilworth from the Neese family. Another crew shot with number 12. Apparently the crew was really proud of this big engine that they had bought. It was the biggest locomotive that Rahway Valley ever owned or operated, at 87 tons, even if they only operated it for a year. After they retired it, it sat around in Kenilworth for years until they finally scrapped it during World War II. Up in the cab on the right is actually Carl Neese. On the right is Pop Snyder, who's the other Rahway Valley engineer at the time. This also came out of the Young collection. Just a really neat photo. It shows number 13 coming into Springfield. It shows the runaround track in the weeds on the right. Up on the left is Shorty Marciano, who was the track foreman for a number of years. So he's kind of there up on the team track there, eating his lunch, while the freight crew comes into Springfield to do their switching work. So just really neat photo. This picture also came out of the Springfield Library. So during World War II, apparently some of the Rahway Valley's customers participated in paper drives to support the war effort. So this is taken at Union County Coal and Lumber in Springfield, actually just in the rear of the previous photo I just showed you. It shows some of the different industries in the area coming together to load up this boxcar full of paper to support the war effort. So not all of my Rahway Valley pictures have come to me through people. I've also bought a lot of stuff off of eBay. So a couple of years ago, the W.R. Hicks collection went up for sale on eBay, which I purchased a number of prints and negatives from. So there's a lot of cool stuff in that collection, but of them, this is one of my favorite. Shows the crew. They just made their pickups up at the Lackawanna Interchange and Summit. They're coming over the Broad Street Bridge. They're all piled on the footboards. The kid's got his foot up on the knuckle. I think that's John Neese. To the right of him is Bobby Heft, who was worked at the Rahway Valley at that time. To the right of him is John Enright, brakeman. All the way to the left, I believe, is Bob Davis. Just all piled on to the rear of number 13's tender, guy up in the cab. Just a really cool people shot. One of the other people I got the chance to meet was Corinne Davis Clark. So her father was George Davis, who worked for the Rahway Valley for well over 40 years, eventually worked his way up to shop foreman and superintendent. And then she married Bob Clark, who was the son of George Clark, the president of the Rahway Valley. So had a really strong family connection with the railroad, grew up around it, rode the steam engines as a little girl. Later worked in the station when Bob Clark, her husband, was the president, doing secretarial work. Just really a pleasure to meet her, interview her. So she had let me scan some of her photographs and things that she had. And then one day she called me up or emailed me and said she had found a folder of stuff that I might be interested in. So she invited me over, looked at the stuff. It was a General Electric portfolio, I guess from when they bought the diesels. And inside was a set of photographs. I guess they had done a photo shoot once they acquired the second diesel to kind of show off the new engines. So this is a picture from that photo shoot. It shows the Caboose 102, number 16 with Frank Frote in the cab, number 17 with George Davis in the cab. The entire Rahway Valley roster in one shot. This is another picture from that photo shoot. So that's George Davis, Corinne Davis Clark's dad, posing with number 17 in the engine house. Just a cool shot of inside with the locomotive. And my favorite photo in that collection was this picture. I don't know who the gentleman on the left is, but the guy on the right is the president and general manager of the railroad, George Arthur Clark. Which if you ask any layperson who the president of the railroad in this picture was, he'd probably say the person on the left. But George Clark always wore work clothes just in case he was needed out on the tracks. And you can see Frank Frote and George Davis looking on from the cabs and locomotives in the background. And then also tucked in that folder of photos was this picture of George Davis on the Rahway Valley's velocipede. So this came from his daughter, Corinne. The story with this velocipede is during the war, when there was gas rationings, George Clark, who lived in Union at the time, got the idea of riding this to work. The story is that the grade between Kenilworth and Union was too stiff over Tin Kittle Hill for George Clark. But I can only imagine that the real reason he stopped using this was because he would have had to have crossed Route 22 and defy death twice a day to and from work. So he only used this for a little while and spent many decades in the engine house at Kenilworth. This photograph came from the Anthracite Railroad's Historical Society. So any heavy work that was ever done on the Rahway Valley locomotives was shopped out to the neighboring railroads. So in the steam times, it was the Lackawanna, the C&J. When the diesels came, they seemed to favor the C&J for a while. And then George Clark had some sort of falling out with the C&J, and they began sending the diesels up to Sayre, where the Lehigh Valley's shops were, for work. So this is where this picture was taken. The big 6-axle Alcos dwarfing the little Rahway Valley 70-tonner number 60 in the background. So this came from ARHS. This picture also came from ARHS, number 16 up at Sayre. Just really cool picture seeing, Rahway Valley locomotive anywhere else but the Rahway Valley, I guess. And this picture came from eBay, actually. So number 17 had also made the trip at some point up to Sayre for work. I believe it was mostly wheel work that they were sending them up there for. And this picture actually came to me from Patty Clark. Patty Clark was George Clark's granddaughter, and Bob Clark's daughter. She had also a folder of photographs and things from remembering her time when she was a little girl, hanging around with her dad and grandfathers in Kenilworth. So this picture is really cool. At first, to me, it was just a really cool picture of number 16 and 17. You don't really ever see too many pictures of them together, and especially not in color. What was really cool when I found out later from Walt Switz is what's happening here is they're putting a carload of liquor inside the engine house for safekeeping. So those are the rare finds. I know I saw some questions in here, so let me just quick answer them before proceeding on. Answering Len Resto, how long have you been researching? Probably seriously for the last 9 years, so since I was 19. Rudy Garbely asking about the ratio of time you spend firmly in your chair versus on the floor next to your chair while researching the Rahway Valley. I don't care to comment on that metric. And Pete Putman, Pete, if you want to drop that in the chat, it's a link to topo maps of the Rahway Valley if anyone's interested. If you want to drop that in the chat, not the Q&A. All right, moving on. Everyone's favorite. So anyone who collects photographs or slides of the railroad's color steam, like in the 1950s, is like the holy grail. If and when you find them on eBay, you pay a lot of money for them. So this is what I've happened to have come across of color steam on the Rahway Valley. This is probably the first photograph I found of Rahway Valley steam in color. It was taken by John Jobco, who also recently passed away, sadly. Great photographer, very prolific, also known as the Godfather. So his picture was up there. There wasn't really a lot of context with it. Me at the time, not knowing much about railroads, had no idea what was going on here. Come to find out later, the Rahway number 13 had a brush up with a swinging pipe, concrete pipe being handled by a crane near the tracks, which severely damaged the locomotive. So what's happening here is that the Rahway Valley is making repairs to number 13. They did repair the locomotive fully, but it never ran again. So this picture, taken nearly the same location, is the first picture I saw of Rahway Valley steam running, and for the longest time was the only picture I had seen like that. So this is number 13 under steam in Kenilworth in 1950. So right near the end. And then I found out that at some point that Mr. William S. Young had written a book called Shortline Odyssey. Bill Young was a big shortline fan, gone all around the country taking pictures of shortline railroads. Had a magazine called Shortline Railroader, I believe. So in this little book he put together, on the cover was this picture. So this is number 15. On the last day that steam ever ran on the Rahway Valley, November 28th, 1953, coming up to South Michigan Avenue. They were running with a skeleton crew that day because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So they were running really behind. The reason they ran steam is because the number 16 had broken down, the diesel. So they had to fire up 15. They had a heck of a time getting it fired up. And George Clark basically had because of the diesel problem, they were all behind on freight work. So they called in a crew for Thanksgiving Day and were backed up for the next 3 days. And everyone was most of the regular crew was out because of the holiday. So they ran the train crew with Frank Frode as the engineer, who's the regular engineer. Frank Amoroso, who's pictured here flagging the crossing. George Clark himself, the president of the railroad, was the fireman that day. And then Bob Davis was the conductor. Probably the next color photograph I've seen was this one, which appeared in a Mike Bednar Lehigh Valley Facilities book. So this picture is taken in 1952. Again, that little overlap period when diesel and steam both ran on the Rahway Valley. So this is at the Lehigh Valley interchange. That's Locust Street in the foreground there. You can see the Roselle Park Station up on the right, and number 15 making the interchange with Lehigh Valley. And a Lehigh Valley freight actually coming through Roselle Park. Really cool photograph. So one thing I did miss out on, someone beat me to it on the William S. Young collection, were his color slides. So they started making an appearance on eBay. So one of the photographs, the slides I acquired, Bill Young really didn't take such great care of his photographs, as you can see in this condition of this slide. It was such a cool photograph in general. This shows number 13 over Russell Place in 1950 with the caboose. They must have the coal stove going. There's a crew member in there leaning out the window with the window open. Snow's over Russell Place. It's really, really cool. Make a good Christmas card. Another picture of number 13 taken by Bill Young under steam. This is really close to the end of 13. This is taken early February of 1951. You can already see that they've got the new diesel tank is in the background there, all the way in the back. The diesel had just shown up like 5 days ago. Prior to this, after the diesel arrived, they kept 15 in service for a few days, and then they put 13 in service. And then it was February 26th, later that month, was the last day that 13 actually ran. This picture was taken around just before the diesel arrived, taken in January 51 by Bill Young up in Springfield. Cool shot of number 15, the caboose. You see Springfield Station in the background there, Mountain Avenue, and Union County Coal and Lumber in the background. This is another Bill Young photograph. Believe it or not, this is taken right in the middle of Kenilworth. This is on the Rahway River branch, also known as the Can branch, or the branch that went to Monsanto. You wouldn't realize it today. That area is very densely filled with houses and streets and stuff. But like they're in this like field. Those are the Watchung Mountains way off in the distance there. I don't know precisely where this was taken, but it was probably taken around North 20th Street or so. Again, unrecognizable today. This is taken in November of 1950. Now this photo was really, really awesome. So when Bill Young found out that the Rahway Valley was running steam in November of 53. He really made an effort to take a bunch of color slides of the last days, feeling that these were the last days of steam on the Rahway Valley. He knew that there were rumblings that the Rahway Valley is getting a second diesel soon. So he felt like this might be the end, and it actually was. So this is 15 down the CNJ. They're backing down to clear the switch. You can see one of those old Reading mile posts to the left there in the weeds. They got a foul track 6 under the Lehigh Valley. Once they back up far enough, they'll clear the switch, throw the switch, pull up track 8 and up into the yard. So Bill Young was up on, there was a pedestrian walk over at Aldine. So he took these pictures of 15 from up there. You can see Frank Amoroso in the cab. He's filling in as fireman that day. Coming out, it's really great photographs. This is looking into Cranford Yard. All the coaches are in there waiting over the holiday weekend. Garden State Parkway in the background, Aldine Station at the right. Just really, really awesome photograph. Just hard to believe there's this many tracks there at one time. The old coal tower, C&J steam hung around for about another year, not even another year. Some of the C&J steam engines are down in the yard. It's another photograph taken January 51. This is at the Roselle Park yard on the Lehigh Valley. This is now the modern day parking lot for the New Jersey Transit station there. And you can place that photograph in the background because that house is still there on the left. Another picture from the last run of steam, November of 53. Number 15, Caboose 102 down the Lehigh Valley. That's Locust Street at the right. That's Bob Davis up on the footboard. It's really cool, nice and sharp shot. Rahway Valley steam. This picture, another shot from the end of steam, November 53. I believe it's somewhere down in Kenworth, Roselle Park. Those look like the Colfax Garden Apartments way in the background there. Another cool shot. Again, it was amazing how densely populated this area was, how they look like they're out in the middle of nowhere. Another November 53 shot. This is up above the Kenilworth Yard, up alongside Galloping Hill Golf Course. The old water tower that was up there on the hill was a landmark and great way to place photographs. This is up by France Campbell and Darling. That might be their switch there. And by the Rahway River branch that went down to the can. So after the Rahway Valley got the first diesel, number 16, number 14 was in need of a lot of repairs. So the Rahway Valley didn't keep it around. They ended up scrapping it. But number 13, 15 stuck around for a while. They stuck them in the old engine house for a long time. So these two shots show them in 1952 inside. 13 never ran again long after the diesel came. And number 15 was kept in good repairs as the backup to the diesel all the way through 1953. So in 1953, they actually tore down the old wooden engine house to build 2 new stalls in additions to the one stall diesel engine house. So while that happened, they pulled the steam engines outside, put them on the old coal track, and it made a good opportunity for rail fans to take pictures. And unfortunately, number 13 never went back inside. 15 did, though. And then in 1956 or so, a gentleman named F. Nelson Blount became interested in Rahway Valley 15. There was about 2 or 3 years of back and forth between Blount and George Clark, negotiating over the price, when he's going to come pick the thing up, when he's going to send the check. Apparently the Strasburg Railroad was interested in this engine for a while, and Clark was a man of his word, already promised it to Blount. But in June 59, the locomotive finally left the Rahway Valley and made it up to Blount's, made it to Pleasure Island in Massachusetts, where Blount was displaying his locomotives at that time. So this picture is actually taken on its way there in Allentown Yard in Pennsylvania. Apparently there was some sort of railfan event happening in Allentown that weekend, and part of the festivities was going down to Allentown Yard and snapping pictures of number 15. So that's the end of the color scheme. So let me just see what the questions are. Okay. So looking at early color shots of the diesels. So this is number 16. Probably one of the earliest shots this shot actually came from Andy Dick, who was one of the first people I interviewed about the Rahway Valley. He was a track laborer for them in the late 70s, early 80s. And he was also a big rail fan and collected tons of slides and stuff. And this is one of his slides taken up on the Lackawanna in the 1950s. This picture was taken by Bill Young. It is labeled as the first day that Rahway Valley number 16 was in service, which I believe was January 30th of 51. George Clark and George Davis were very reluctant to put 16 in service right away. It arrived on January 29th. They did some testing with it the next day, which is, I believe, when this picture was taken. But it didn't go into regular service for about another month. They kept steam up. George and George wanted to play with the engine for a while, get to know it, get to learn its idiosyncrasies. So then they could instruct the engineer Frank Frote on how to operate it. So this was taken in January 51, Roselle Park on the Lehigh Valley. This picture is probably the first picture ever taken of number 16 on the Rahway Valley. It was taken the morning after it arrived. It arrived on January 29th, 1951 at the Lackawanna Interchange. It arrived with a rider or a messenger on board who came from GE, who rode with the locomotive the whole way from Erie. He was equipped with a little coal stove on board the engine. And he stuck around for a little while after to help the Rahway Valley install number 16. So this is number 16 inside the brand new engine house, which was constructed for it. Apparently, George Clark, while partial to steam, was like a kid with a new toy when the engine showed up. Bill Young in his diary wrote that he was strutting around like a turkey when the diesel showed up and was quite pleased with it. And he was quite pleased with the engine house. Apparently, the joke was among the crew that the crew would have to take their boots off before going inside. It's another picture of 16 taken on the same day. The brand new diesel and the brand new engine house contrasts with the old wooden engine house, the old wooden track cars, and 13 and 14 inside. This was also taken early into the diesel's tenure. This is up above Baltusrol, up on the grade. A pretty impressive set of cars for a 70-tonner, if I do say so myself. Some of those cars are cement hoppers, which are exceptionally heavy, which were going up to the batch cement plant at a Hudai stone quarry in Springfield. Another picture is 16. Coming up Tin Kettle Hill, just above the yard in Kenilworth. It's a cool shot. You can see the brakeman up on top of the cut of cars there. One of the hood doors is open on 16 for some reason. And over on the right, you can actually see cars spotted on the Franz Campbell and Darling siding. Galloping Hill Golf Course is off to the left. So in February of 1954, the Rahway Valley took delivery of number 17, its second 70-tonner, its second diesel, the last locomotive it ever purchased. And this locomotive effectively finally replaced steam on the Rahway Valley. So it was delivered February 2nd, 1954, again, at the Lackawanna interchange. And this picture was taken by Bill Young of number 17 at the Lehigh Valley interchange about 3 weeks after it arrived. This is again taken February 54. This is number 17, brand spanking new. It just came off the Lehigh Valley, or it's heading down to Lehigh Valley, actually, probably. West Webster Avenue is in the background there. Unrecognizable today. The ball field and the high school is to the left. There's a bunch of houses to the right on Laurel Avenue. Another early shot of number 17, using the Rahway River branch that went down to American Can, later American Laundry, Monsanto, as a lead to switch out some cars. France Campbell and Darling on the right. The old water tower at the golf course in the background. It's really neat photograph. 1940 early, freight cars and stuff. Another shot of 17. Here they are down in Kenilworth, just south of the Parkway. So to the left was a customer lock joint pipe. They made all sorts of different concrete pipes and culverts and things like that. We're a customer of the railroad. So what's going on here is they're using the old Mike's Coal siding as a lead to switch out their cars. Back further down, you can see another cut of cars. That's where the split was for the line that went to Lehigh Valley and the line that went to the CNJ. So this was a spot they used a lot to sort their cars. Again, number 17 with Caboose 102. This is up just north. Is that Branch Junction, just north of the Route 22 crossing called Route 29 in those days. They did use the caboose for a little while after the diesel came. It eventually became pretty run down, the caboose. The George Clark considered replacing it for a while, but then ended up resolving that, the locomotive had an enclosed heated cab. Why did they really need the caboose? Because they only really used it in cold weather and the rain and snow and stuff. So this is a picture that I did not end up with. I included this photo, one, because it's really cool. And two, I wanted to give an example of what crazy money people spend on color slides from the 1950s. So this picture was taken in 54, shows number 17 on the Maplewood branch. And this is Morris Avenue. Shows the bridge was painted green. The Rahway Valley put its name on its bridges, white letters with red trim. That's Elmwood Avenue in the background, old International paint just behind the bridge abutment at the right. The old Esso station, which is now a 7-Eleven. The only thing really recognizable is some of the houses, the road configuration, and the bridge abutment on the right still there. Just a really cool photo. I did bid on this. I did not win. Even me, as crazy as I am about the Rahway Valley, have a limit. So this picture actually went for over $400 for a slide. Just really crazy. This photograph came from the Anthracite Railroad Historical Society collection. Believe it or not, this picture was taken right next to Liberty Avenue in Union. So if you're familiar with Union today, to the left is that satellite parking lot for Bed Bath & Beyond, where they have the food trucks on Thursdays. So way back when this picture was taken in 58, I believe, there was an old farmhouse there. So Brakeman here is getting off the front of number 16, which has got a pretty good cut of cars to go flag Liberty Avenue. Another picture also from ARHS, courtesy of Rich John. So thank you, Rich John, of number 17 at the same location, heading eastbound. Another really cool photograph. This came from Mike Del Vecchio. This shows in the early 50s, the Rahway Valley actually repainted the caboose, and that's when it got its yellow cupola. So it's a really bright, shiny photograph to show how the caboose is painted. Painted red, green trim windows, yellow cupola. The grab irons were painted like a silver graphite color. Just really cool. Shows the headlights that it had on it, which actually came from an old Buick that was abandoned behind the Kenilworth station that they stole and put on the caboose to run at night. And here's another picture of when the caboose was repainted. There's actually apparently some rail fans that blew through Kenilworth and were hanging around taking pictures and stuff, and that's actually one of them on the right there. Another really neat color photograph was this one. So at the end of the Rahway Valley's Maplewood branch was Woolley Coal. Was at the absolute end of the branch. Woolley Coal is now known as Woolley Fuel. They're still up there, same location in Maplewood. So these are their coal silos up in Maplewood. And on the left, you actually see their siding buried in the gravel. Someone just quick asked, what was the origin of Caboose 102? Caboose 102 was ex-Lackawanna. It was built in 1914 in the Kaiser Valley shops. It was originally Lackawanna number 613. The Rahway Valley bought it in 1937. So the Walt Switz collection. So Walt Switz, would you like to come help me explain your photos? So I guess we met like 8 years ago, something like that.
Sounds about right, yeah.
So to give some background, Walt's first railroad job was on the Rahway Valley. You were hired in February of 66?
Correct, yeah.
19?
66.
Yeah, you were 19.
I was 19 years old, right?
Yeah. So I met Walt through Jeff and Mike, and it's been a tremendous amount. It's provided a tremendous amount of information, photographs. Has answered all of my incessant questions with begrudgingly with smiles at times. So so Walt actually, when he was on the Rahway Valley, took a number of photographs and slides. This picture is not one of his pictures, but is a picture of Walt working on the Rahway Valley. That's Walt on the footboard with the intrepid engineer Frode looking on.
Fearless Frode.
So we'll work through some of your photos here, and I'll let you speak to them.
All right, this is actually just before I hired out when I was applying for the job. I showed up in the morning one time. I guess about the week before I actually started service, and the crew was just going to work. And I asked George Clark if I could just go outside, take a few photographs, and which he agreed to. So that's what I did, a series of, I think, 3 pictures. George Davis on the footboard, and Tony DeFrancisco is the conductor walking out to the train. So they were just making their first moves coming out of the house. This was a while later. We were fueling the engine and probably putting some sand on it as well. Frank Frode is in the doorway of the pump house, and he would just mosey around for a while just to stand up and move a little bit and get the blood circulating while the engine was being serviced. This is one afternoon when we arrived at Summit. Ran up as far as we basically can go. The job out of Croxton had just arrived shortly before. They were making a few moves on the old team track, the elevations there, and we had to wait for them to finish their stuff and put our stuff together before we're able to actually claim anything. Roselle Park interchange, just got off lunch, and all we had that day, I guess, was that one hopper car. I think that might have been Cannel Coal. I'm not sure.
It was for Papyrus, wasn't it?
Papyrus, yeah. So it was a light day for the interchange. And this is another day tied up for lunch at the east end of Roselle Park Yard. So the crew was usually in a little luncheonette just behind the engineer, and I usually packed my lunch. So after I got done, I figured, let me go up on an embankment, just take a photo of this dirty engine before he gets repainted.
You want to tell them about the window?
The window, yes, that's right. You can just barely see that front left window, spider webbed a little bit. Coming into Kenilworth after crossing 22, we were doing pretty about maybe 20 miles an hour coming through the golf course, and I was standing next to that window, and the engine was pitching this way and that way, and then finally it took one hard low joint, and my butt went up against the window. I was wearing jeans, so the rivet on the jeans impacted the window, and I heard it crack and turned around. And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now, which the conductor says, you're going to be in trouble with George Davis when he sees that. And I was. But he grudgingly fixed it, and after about a week or so, it got replaced. So all was forgiven. Memories maybe, but I'm sure he held it against me to his dying day. And this was just after the engine was repainted. Again, we're tied up for lunch at Roselle Park, and I think the paint job cost about $500. I think 2 or 3 guys spent about 4 or 5 days, split between 2 weeks, and they brush painted this thing, brush painted and rollered it, and they did a pretty decent job considering what they had to work with. So it looked pretty spiffy. And here's another visitor. Actually, there's 2 visitors there. Old Winston Links Combine, which was well aged by the time it got out of there, and an ex-C&J caboose, which we brought in, and it was going to somewhere. And although I recorded the number in my conductor's book, unfortunately, I don't have the conductor's book to refer to. But that sat there for several weeks, and then we finally moved it out. Or I think somebody came in and offloaded it with a crane, and where it went, I can't even. I don't remember. This is George Metz, who was a furloughed Lackawanna brakeman, and he worked with us for several months until he got recalled to the EL. And he was a very good guy to work with, very safe, knowledgeable, gave me a few tips about things because he had about 5 or 6 years experience. And he had just reopened that spring derail and is running up to the engine to get on so we can go back light to Kenilworth. Another co-worker, Johnny Kahn, also well known with the Black River and Western. In fact, he was qualified in steam on the BR&W. He ran number 60 for a while, fired and ran it, and contributed to rebuilding it. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years back, but here he was. I'm trying to remember whether he was trying to work for the Pensy, furlough off the Pensy or whatever, but he came to work with the Rahway Valley again for a short time, and a very seasoned rail fan. He used to go to Mexico every couple of years and ride the narrow gauge on the Mexican railroads. So a lot of experience with steam, and a bowl of fun to work with too. A lot of funny stories. This is just a view back. One of the heavier trains we took up to Summit. I think it was about 9 or 10 cars there. So I figured, you don't often get that many cars going to Lackawanna. It's usually was about 5 or 6. So this was like a big time train. So I figured, let me get on running board and just take one shot for posterity, which I'm glad I did. Another shot, just passing after we passed Western Electric, heading for the Rahway River Bridge, heading up to Springfield. Was hoping for a little more color with the foliage, but it came out pretty good as it was. Bad memories. This was one of the seldom cars for Maplewood Stone. We used to have to shove it up, and we got it to their spot, which was maybe another 10 car lengths past where it sits now. One of the newer brakemen was up on the handbrake, and he was applying the brake. So we got the car spotted, which was a struggle because there was so much grass on the track. The engine kept slipping. So we tried to get some dirt, sand. We finally got up to pretty much where it was supposed to be. And then we gave up. We tried to put a skate underneath the wheel. The skate wouldn't even stay put. It kept spitting out. So we chalked it with some wood. Brakeman said he got the handbrake on as tight as he could, and we left the car there. And this was a Friday. So we went on about our business. We came back in Monday morning, and George Clark called us in the office and said, "Mate, you got to go up to Maplewood Stone. Their car went over the derail." So we don't know what happened. One story is that the kids got a hold of the car and got rid of the chocks, knocked the brake off. Another story is that the brake wasn't properly applied. So we don't know for sure, but we tried to re-rail the car. It was like 40 tons of Tennessee marble. And we couldn't even budge the car to go once again for weeds on the track. So finally they cut a pathway through the jungle, unloaded as much of the car as possible so we can move it. And finally, when it got just about empty, we were able to move the car and re-rail it. But it was like a 3-day affair, much to our dismay and Mr. Clark's displeasure. And here's another big train going, heading for Route 22 after we got everything done in Union, and passing the Lake Newark Iron, where the track just disappeared into nothing. And we had a pretty good cut that day. So I think it was about roughly a dozen cars that we left Union with. So a good day's work for sure. And this is about 3 or 4 days after Baltusrol Station burned. Just going by on our way up to Summit. I figured, well, I never got a picture of the darn station when it was okay. Now I get the remains of it anyway. So they were just cleaning up a few things there. And the notorious Aldine wreck. That spring derail that was in the prior photograph with George Matz, you were allowed to run through it coming into the yard, and naturally you had to throw it to the opposite direction to leave the yard, but it was a spring derail. So apparently what happened when we're going in, the Pensy box car, the wheels got pushed against the right-hand rail, and they wouldn't swivel back in line. So they wound up picking the switch, and then they took the next car with it. And it was a big bang. I turned around, I saw the car bouncing. I waved and hollered, but because the engine was wide open and throat was looking in the opposite direction and the conductor was in the doorway behind at the end of the cab, no one heard me. So the cars bounced, and then finally the air hose parted, and boom, that's where it went. So the truck for the Pensy car is actually sitting under the nickel plate car behind it. And once again, this was a Friday. We wound up having to secure the engine, leaving it in Oldene Yard, and then over the weekend, George Clark and Davis and I think the track guys came out, and with just blocks and come-alongs, they managed to get the thing back on a track. So just one of those deals where you never know what's going to happen.
That's George Clark right there, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is. That's right. That is George Clark right underneath the PRR there. So I took the pictures, but he didn't say a word to me and I didn't say a word to him.
Oh, we had a question come in. Well, did you guys have radios?
The radios were in the office and on the engine, but they were never used. There was a problem with them sometime in the past and they never got the problem corrected, so they were just ornaments. Everything was hand signals
And past notes.
and notes. Yes.
Well, thank you, Walt. It's the end of your pictures.
No,
I
okay.
greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye, guy. That deserves a drink.
There you go. All right, moving right along. So now moving into the stuff from the photographers, which is a bunch of pictures I like for a variety of reasons. Some are really just really good, crisp, quality photographs. So we'll see what they got. So one of the real early, what I would call photographers, was Dick Fullerton. So his stepfather was a gentleman named Henry Demke, who was an engineer for the V&O. And through his stepfather, his stepfather was related to a Helen Demke, who was the wife of Carl Neese, who worked at the Rahway Valley as the master mechanic. So through that weird family connection, Dick Fullerton was acquainted with the Rahway Valley, and was asked by Railroad Magazine to go and take some photographs of the Rahway Valley for the magazine for an upcoming piece they did in 1940. So at the end of 39, Dick Fullerton went up and took a bunch of photographs. So one of the real great photographs that came out of this was this one. This was taken November of 1939. It's just as they're starting their day. They had just got the engine out. They would have blown down the engine, watered it, coaled it. There was a boxcar spotted at the freight house. The freight house was in the main line, so I had to get the boxcar out of the way. That's Tom Mangini up on the tender, who's the fireman. They had just watered the engine. George Davis is all the way on the right, walking towards the office. His pockets filled with paperwork. So I'm assuming he was the conductor that day. Number 14's in the engine house. Number 13's nowhere to be found. This is when number 13 actually went up to Scranton. It was overhauled by the Lackawanna. Great photograph. This actually came out of the Carson's collection. This Dick Fullerton photograph. It was actually there were hand drawn lines on this picture, which is how they cropped photographs back in the day. So with the help of Rudy Garbely, with his masterful Photoshop skills, we're able to restore this photograph and get rid of those hand drawn lines. So like I mentioned, Tom Mangini had just watered the engine. Well, here's a picture of that. That's Tom Mangini up on a tender of 15, giving the engine a drink from the tank up at Kenilworth. This is actually the rear cover of my first photograph, my first book I did on the Rahway Valley, the first edition of Volume 1. And I just love the crew shots. This is another Dick Fullerton photograph, November of 39. So from left to right, you have Carl Neese, the master mechanic, George Davis, Paul Albright, who's the brakeman, Tom Mangini, fireman, and Frank Frote, who's the engineer. It's a great photograph of the crew. Another shot taken the same day. Number 15 is down the switch for the engine house. This might have been right after they took the engine out, possibly. Or might have been doing some switching. Bunch of guys down there by the switch. Just a cool shot. Cars in front of the office, smoke billowing early in the day. Great shot. Dick Fullerton came back other days, other than just the November 39 photo shoot, and took some other photographs. So this is a nice shot of number 14 up by the water tank, real low angle. Number 12 is in the background, which was stored in Kenilworth for well over 15 years. Another picture of 14. Brakeman throwing the switch. This is down at the mouth of the Kenilworth Yard. The boulevard's in the background. That's Volco Brass, a Rahway Valley customer across the street. Great photograph. So here's a cool picture. So this number 14 again. This is Carl Neese, who's the master mechanic of the Rahway Valley until he retired in 1948. And that's his son, John Sharon Neese was his full name. His family called him Sharon, which he hated for obvious reasons. So later in life, he went by John. So he would hang during his summer breaks and weekends and stuff. He would hang around with his dad down at the Rahway Valley, help him fix the engines during summer recess, and later had a career on the railroad. When his dad retired, they moved down to Virginia, had a cattle farm down there, and John eventually got a job in the railroad. I was fortunate enough to get in touch with his family and get a number of photographs from them, which I'll forever be thankful for. So next photographer, Hal Karstens from Karstens Publications, also went to the Rahway Valley and took a number of photographs. So right around the time that Karstens Publications was going out of business, I got in touch with them. Some of Hal's pictures had been printed in some of the articles in his magazines. So I was reaching out to see if they had anything in the archive that they might be willing to share. I forget the name of the person I corresponded with, but he was very helpful. And this is what we were able to find. So this picture, which was the cover of my first edition of Volume 1, was the Hal Karstens picture. It was taken in 1950. Number 13. This is in Union. They just crossed Liberty Avenue. Again, you wouldn't know it today. But this picture was on the back cover of one of the Karstens Publications magazines that Jeff Jargish had and showed me. So I had asked them about this photograph, and it wasn't in the folder with the rest of the photographs. So he was really racking his brain as to where it might be. Come to find out, it wasn't in the folder with the photographs, because it was hanging on the wall of Mrs. Karstens' living room. So they took the picture down off the wall for me, and were able to scan it and get me this scan. So very thankful for that. This is another Hal Karstens shot, short train up on the curve in Springfield going up the grade. This is about in the area of Bryant Lake Park today. So they're heading for Orchard Street, Turnpike Road Bridge. Next photograph. So in 49, Hal Karstens had went down to the Rahway Valley and shot a number of photographs. So this photo was taken at the Lehigh Valley interchange. Just like Walt did, they would tie down the engine, go get lunch, and wait on the Lehigh Valley. So what Walt was doing in the mid 60s, they were also doing in the late 40s. So number 13 is tied down. They're waiting for their interchange, which was not this train. This was a mainline freight heading somewhere. A bunch of the ABBA set of Alco FAs. coming through Roosevelt Park, passing number 13. So the train that the Rahway Valley was waiting for was this one of the local Lehigh Valley drills that would have set up cars at Roosevelt Park. Number 13 is up ahead of the crossover, so the engine can shove back and drop the cars, and then 13 can come back and make its pickups. So here's another picture of that drill, Lehigh Valley Mikado, really dwarfing number 13 in the background there. This is all changed today. The Lehigh Valley main was elevated with the Aldine plan, and the Rahway Valley's interchange was moved to the other side of Locust Street. The only landmark in this photo, again, is that house in the background that's still there at the back of the New Jersey Transit parking lot for Roosevelt Park Station. In 51, Karstens came back again to take more photographs right after they got the diesel. So this is in June of 51, evidently a very hot day, and in Rahway Valley tradition, the brakeman is not wearing a shirt. So they had just made a pickup from the CNJ, and this is about Roosevelt Park, Kenilworth border. It's labeled Aldine. Again, really hard to pinpoint. It was pretty sparsely developed back then. Again, wouldn't know it today. That this is somewhere in Roosevelt Park. It looks like they're out in the middle of the woods. So next photograph, this is the Rahway River Bridge, which is, if you're a local Unionite like me, everyone calls it a trestle, even though it's not engineering-wise a trestle. This is crossing the Rahway River Bridge and the border between Union and Springfield. Number 16, the caboose, that same brakeman up on the pilot. They're about to cross Mizell Avenue. So what the brakeman's probably doing is looking to see if the crossing flashers are activating. It was the only set of automatic flashers on the entire railroad. So heading further railroad westbound, another Hal Karsten shot, the same brakeman on this very hot day. This was at Baltusrol. So after passenger service ended and after the Baltusrol post office closed in the mid 1930s, the Rahway Valley leased out the Baltusrol station to Andrew Wilson Company, which manufactured insecticides. We're also a customer of the railroad, so used the Baltusrol station for storage. So this is all their landscaping and buildings and driveway up at Baltusrol. So next steam era photographer was John Krause. John was a very prolific photographer, has had his work published in a number of books. And so this is what he took of the Rahway Valley. So in 1949, he came to the Rahway Valley in the winter. Number 14 was running that day. They had just come up from the Lehigh Valley interchange. This is labeled Roosevelt Park. I believe that's John Enright on the pilot. Great, crisp, clear photograph of number 14 working that day. Later in the day, they went up to Summit. This is the lead into the team track / freight office, where the old Summit Depot was. Today, this is the start of the Summit Park line in the parking lot of the apartment complex there. What's pretty cool about the fact that they're building this rail trail is they've done a lot of brush clearing, and they actually cleared off the face of the cut there. So all that rock that you see behind 14, you can go up and pinpoint exactly where this photograph was taken today. So pretty cool. And actually, the Tri-State Railway Historical Society put a interpretive sign right at this spot, and this photograph is on it. Another John Krause photograph on a different day. I don't believe I have the date for this one, but it's a cool picture. Actually, probably my favorite photograph since I live right down the street from this bridge. This is Rahway Valley number 13. For those familiar with the Black River and Western, might know the name Carl Conover. Well, Carl Conover grew up in a house, that farmhouse I showed you, one of those pictures, that was located on Liberty Avenue, right up against the tracks. And when the train would come up to flag Liberty Avenue, Carl Conover, as a young kid, would hop a ride and ride with the train and flag the crossings for them heading up to Summit. Well, that little kid on the pilot of number 13 is Carl Conover. And the guy standing on the pilot is John Enright. Funny story about Carl Conover in his youth. He and a few friends would go swimming at the Rahway River. Well, they resolved that they didn't want to walk anymore. So one day, when no one was around the Kenilworth yard, they went down and stole 2 sets of wheels from a trailer that went behind a motor car. Brought them home and made their own little cart to ride down from Carl's house down to the Rahway River. Well, back in those days, where Western Electric and Breeze later were, it's now Bed Bath & Beyond, was a golf course called the Bow Hill Golf Club. And the general manager of the golf club saw this all going on, these young kids riding up and down the tracks on this little cart going to go swimming. Well, he called the Union Police Department, and they must have thought that this was a pretty big to do, because the Union Police Department performed a sting on these little kids and made them disassemble the cart in front of them. And George Clark was so incensed that he wrote Carl Conover's dad a letter. Kids were always hanging around the Rahway Valley, and Clark generally knew who these kids were and who their parents were. So he wrote his dad a letter and said if the wheels weren't returned within 48 hours, he would have Carl arrested. But apparently all was forgotten and forgiven, because later Clark on occasion would hire Carl Conover to come in and help in the Kenilworth office. So like I've been saying, some of these photographs, some parts of the Rahway Valley look really out in the country and out in the woods. This is a John Krause shot, number 13, John Enright on the pilot. I have no idea where this was taken. Really cool picture. Shows how sparsely developed Union County was at the time. Really just looks like they're out in the country. Another one of my favorite John Krause shots, number 13. This could be a really good cover shot for a future book. This is number 13 up by the Hoodale Stone Quarry in Springfield. So kind of obscured by the trees and the power lines, you can see the old batch cement plant that the Rahway Valley would deliver cement hoppers to. They'd mix cement for construction jobs going on around the area. But the engine's probably working pretty hard. They're heading up grade to Summit through here. There's a few cars in tow in the caboose. Just really cool shot. So you've seen a bunch of his work so far in this presentation. William S. Young grew up in Cranford, New Jersey, was a rail buff all of his life. And in the 1940s, he was a neighbor of the Neese family in Cranford. John Sharon Neese, was Carl Neese's son and around Bill Young's age, and they became buddies. So they began hanging around the Rahway Valley together. And Bill Young used to bring his camera and take pictures as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid and onwards. So the collection of photographs that I acquired from his family was over 400 photographs. I've since acquired negatives. There's a lot of great content. So this is a really cool photograph Young took. He was only 13, 14 at the time. Looking at the engine shed, the very dilapidated engine shed, number 13. It's early in the morning. The engine's under steam. Carl Neese and his shop assistant, Fred Grant, are painting the smoke box. And that's John Sharon Neese on the footboard, posing for Bill Young's photograph. This picture is pretty cool for a number of reasons. It was taken in the blizzard of 47, which is a huge snowstorm in this area. It's cool because number 13 is wearing its homemade snowplow, which was really just a big wall just to push the snow. It only fit that engine, so the Rahway Valley made sure during the winter season that 13 was in good repairs if they had to be in snowplow duty. It's really cool for another reason, not just because it shows the plow and the blizzard, but because number 13 is facing south. All Rahway Valley engines, as a rule, always pointed towards Summit. Because they didn't want the Jeff, you explain it.
The boiler water to run downhill when they went up the summit.
Yeah.
So Frank Frote always said they couldn't run the opposite direction because it would uncover the crown sheet. So they tended to always give Frank his way and would point the engines toward the uphill side.
Yeah. And even in the diesel era, when Frank was still the engineer, they still kept running the diesels pointed towards Summit. So to see a Rahway Valley engine pointed towards Aldine is pretty rare. They turned it on the Y in Union to plow the snow. This picture is also cool because number 14 is parked in front of the engine house and it's also under steam. 14 was the freight engine that day with the regular crew, and number 13 with Carl Neese as the engineer ran snowplow duty, which was a sore spot because the regular crew was unionized and the relief crew was not. Here's another shot. John Enright, our very photogenic brakeman. This is Tin Kettle Hill. So there's a little rise in the tracks between Route 22 and the Kenilworth Yard. I don't know how steep it was, but it was enough to give the engines a run for their money. There's a little bit of a cut there. This is like the S curve above Kenilworth. So number 13 is working. John Enright's on the pilot. It's Bobby Heff, the fireman, in the cab window. It's about February 51, I believe, maybe earlier. Another cool photograph. This is Orchard Street / Shunpike Road in Springfield. Bryant Lake Park would be to the left. That's number 15 working towards Lackawanna Interchange and Summit. Great photograph. The only other pictures I have of this bridge are after the railroad went out of business, overgrown. So to see a picture of a train going over it and a steam locomotive, no less. Great rare photograph. It's actually a negative of Young's that I have in my collection. Another shot that you would never know where this was taken today. The only way I was able to place where this photograph was taken was by those three houses on the right, which all still exist. This is the middle of Kenilworth. This is the Rahway River branch that went down to American Can, American Laundry, and later Monsanto. So today the railroad's completely gone. It was parceled off and houses built on top of it. All this empty space is filled with houses. But those three houses on the right are still there. I believe they're on 20th and 21st Street. If you go on Google aerials, which was what I did, you can find these houses. But that's number 13, backing down the branch. And here's the next picture that Young took, about to cross the street here. I believe that's North 21st Street, with one gondola in tow. Another cool photograph, brakeman riding a gondola car. This is between South Michigan Avenue and Market Street in Kenilworth. Great shot. Just kind of shows you how they would switch and get cars on either side of the engine. There was only one runaround on the railroad, and there was only one and then the Y. So the train crew really took opportunities when they had them to think ahead and get cars where they needed to be on either side of the engine, to spot cars on the different sidings that face different directions. Another great Bill Young shot. This is number 15 up at Baltusrol. The Andrew Wilson sign, who was leasing the station at the time, up on the station. Really pretty kind of rare to find pictures taken at Baltusrol. For whatever reason, people didn't venture too far out on the railroad, and probably for good reason too. Bill Young knew the railroad. He kind of knew to expect where them to be. Any rail fan who came that wasn't familiar with the railroad, they always went to Kenilworth on a Sunday because there was always an engine sitting there, and that's where the majority of the pictures you see were taken. Other than that, there was only one train. You didn't know where they were. So people didn't really venture out too much, but Bill Young knew where to be and when to be. So he snapped a shot at Baltusrol. Another picture of Bill Young's. This is Ashwood Avenue up in Summit, engine working upgrade. That might be Bobby Heft in the cab there. I'm not sure. This bridge is still there. Is going to be repurposed for the rail trail that they're building in Summit. Most of these houses are still there, so pretty easy to place this. And of course, number 15 is still with us up at Steamtown. Another awesome picture showing the yard at Cranford. That's number 13 up at the front. Aldine Station at the right. All the C&J coaches in the yard. C&J steam engines up ahead. Coal tower. Coal train, empty coal train. Just a lot going on in this picture. Most of this scene is basically all this scene has changed. There's warehouses and gas stations up against the street now. The roundhouse, which you can barely see up ahead, is still there, but it's the DPW building now. The Aldine ramp is there. So it's amazing how this place has changed. Number 15 again. This is up at Meisel Avenue. A great shot, low shot that Bill Young took of the kids on their bicycles watching the train go by. The automatic flashers are going. The one post from the one set of flashers is still there. Great shot. These might be Bill Young's friends. They used to ride around their bicycles. Sometimes they would meet the track crew on the speeders, and they would throw their bikes up on the trailers that they towed behind, and they'd give them a ride down to Kenilworth. So these might be Bill Young's friends posing for this picture. Don't know. Another cool picture. That's that farmhouse again that was on Liberty Avenue. That was the Conover family lived in. Completely changed today. It's a parking lot back there. Tracks are in the weeds and out of the street. That's George Davis on the left on the pilot. He worked from the Rahway Valley from 1927 to 1972. So saw a lot of the railroad's history. This is number 13 on the other side of Liberty Avenue. So my story about Carl Conover, I mentioned the Battle Hill Golf Club. So if you were to zoom in on this picture, on the right side to the right side of the caboose, you would see golfers. So I can only imagine, knowing today's driving ranges, how many balls might have gone through the caboose windows. Pretty great Bill Young shot. This is on the curve up above Kenilworth. There was a pond there for years. It kind of slowly got filled in by the industries that were kind of dumping there. And while it was there, it was kind of a bucolic rural scene. It made for this nice photograph. Number 15 coming up Tin Kettle Hill is a bunch of cars. Apparently, according to Bill Young, the record for the grade up Tin Kettle Hill was 33 cars. This is number 13, coming out of the curve at Aldine, before everything was rearranged by the Aldine plan. This is when the station was still active as a passenger station. So this was the main station building. On the other side of the tracks was a little waiting shelter. And to get over this tracks was this pretty large walkover, which actually had some signals attached to it. After 1954, the station was no longer used for passengers. It was solely a freight office. They took the staircases down off the crossover and then just kept it around for a while for the signals. And then when the Aldine plan came, was finally taken down. The tracks were flipped here for the Rahway Valley, and the station was eventually torn down. It's now about the site of Sun Tavern Pizzeria. Black and white Bill Young, diesel shot. This is the Rahway River branch switch, just above Kenilworth. Cool shot. You can see two brakemen up on top of the cars, working. Probably the conductor up on the pilot. Great shot. So next photographer, just a quick look in the Q&A. What issue of Railroad magazine? I believe it was April of 1940 that the Rahway Valley was in. I have it at home. John Krause always tried to have people in his photos, which we greatly appreciate. The picture on the cover of my book is in color. The picture I showed on the Rahway River Bridge looked very similar to the one in black and white. The one with Conover on the crossing. That picture on the cover of my book is actually colorized. Rudy Garbely is a master of Photoshop and colorized that photograph, that black and white John Krause photograph for the cover. Someone asked to please again explain why the engine is always face north.
Well, it really wasn't necessary, but Frank Frote, who's very strong-minded about certain things, felt that the water in the boiler, the water level, when a locomotive will run uphill, it will slosh to the back of the boiler. If you're running downhill, the water will drain toward the front. Frank was always afraid of uncovering the crown sheet and causing a boiler explosion. So if you were to be looking at the water gauges in the engine, they will show low level or an extremely high level. It's just a matter of getting used to how much is where you're really in trouble. But Frank always felt that he was running a risk by going the other way and uncovering the crown sheet. If he were running with low water, I suppose he had a chance of having a problem, but that was his opinion. And most railroads, of course, running through the mountains and whatever else, deal with that it wasn't really something to worry about. But he felt it was, and I guess Pop Snyder, who he learned from, maybe he felt that way, and they trained one another. But if you're running on level ground, the crown sheet should have a couple inches of water over the top to keep it from overheating. So that's where he got that from, or at least that was his explanation for why he was afraid to run the other way. He may not wanted to spend the time turning it around either.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so the next pictures come from Rich Taylor. Rich is an awesome guy. I've had the chance to meet him several times. Very, very prolific photographer. I'm sure if you're on Facebook, you've seen him posted a lot of his stuff. Great stuff, recorded a ton of history, and hit up and went to the Rahway Valley a few times. So this picture was taken April 4th of 1969. This is the curve heading into the Lehigh Valley interchange at Roselle Park after they moved the yard because of the Aldine plan. The engine is probably just about crossing the diamond that led to Lehigh Valley's team track. You got two Buffalo Creek boxcars that are coming from Levinson, which was in Union, and then two DuPont hopper cars, which were probably empties from Monsanto that had come in with plastic. This photograph is really cool. So this is when they were elevating the Lehigh Valley through Roselle Park. So for those who don't know, the C&J was losing a ton of money on their ferry operations from between Jersey City and New York. The state stepped in to try to consolidate operations so the C&J could save a bunch of money. What they did was they put a ramp at Aldine to connect the C&J to Lehigh Valley, so the C&J trains could terminate at Newark Penn Station. So to do that, they had to build this ramp, and all the Lehigh Valley had a number of grade crossings between Aldine in Roselle Park and Hillside. So what they did is there would be a ton of traffic created by all the extra passenger train traffic. So what they did is elevate the tracks. So that's what's going on the left here. The CNJ had to close its Roselle Park station because of the reroute. So they built a new CNJ station on the Lehigh Valley in Roselle Park, which is the same station that's there today. But to build that station, they had to move the freight yard that was there where the Rahway Valley did its interchange. So they moved that to the other side of Locust Street, which is the brand new yard you see in this picture. So it was a small yard, 4 tracks?
That's what you see.
Yep. Small yard. Lehigh Valley came down off the embankment and down at grade, and Rahway Valley curved off to the right. And in the background, we see that Great Northern car was a Lehigh Valley team track. Across the Rahway Valley lead on a diamond. This is another Rich Taylor shot. Really cool shot. April 1969. See those Buffalo Creek cars again. But the reason it's really cool is because you see all the dogs that were at the Kenilworth station. Apparently, the Clarks were really big dog lovers, and there were railroad dogs around the Rahway Valley for at least 40 or 50 years. They were never spayed or neutered, so the dogs begat other dogs. So there are generations of Rahway Valley dogs mulling around the place. And only the dogs that George Clark favored were allowed inside, but all the mutts had to stay outside. Apparently, they would sneak onto Galloping Hill Golf Course and steal balls from golfers. The police would chase them back to the Rahway Valley. And apparently, a tradition for several years, every morning the track crew would come in and shovel the dog poop out of the inspection pit in the engine house. It's another neat shot. This is coming down towards the C&J. They're about to cross West Webster Avenue, which was Pinewood Avenue, or also called Pinewood Avenue. That crossing is no longer there. Yes.
What's the dates on these last 2 photos?
This one's April of 1969.
We just look like me in this one.
We'll go back and check.
Okay.
Just a cool Rich Taylor photograph. On the back of the engine, you can see the toolbox that they kept a number of things in for their work throughout the day. It was painted red to match the engine. Next photographer, Paul Carpenito. He's involved with the Phillipsburg Railroad historians. Another great guy who I've corresponded with. He's been very generous in providing photographs. Another very prolific photographer. And I'm very happy to have made contact with him and very thankful that he was able to share so much with me. So this picture was taken at Cranford late in the day. Looks like the Rahway Valley just made its set outs at Aldine. It's heading up track to go drop off their paperwork in the little phone booth that was attached to the roundhouse. The Cranford drill's tied down for the day. It's the middle locomotive there. And a CNJ commuter train is coming through with Jeep 40P 3677. And the reason this is cool is because both Rahway Valley 17 and 3677 still exist today. 3677 is now NJT 4109, which is the CNJ Heritage engine. And these 2 locomotives were reunited again in Boonton this past September for a railroad museum for a day, which is pretty cool. Another Paul Carpenito shot. This is at Bound Brook. Are we going or coming from Sayre?
You're going to Sayre.
We're going to Sayre. So Rahway Valley sending up number 16 for wheel work. Another cool yet deceiving shot. This was taken at Aldine or / Cranford. Picking up 5 cars, but the cars on the other track kind of makes it look like the train's much longer. This was taken in the early 70s. You can see the track from the Aldine ramp in the foreground. Another Paul Carpenito shot coming around the curve out of Aldine. Either side of the tracks is a bunch of stuff stored by Haran Lumber. The Rahway Valley had a bunch of problems with Haran lumber for years, piling stuff up too close to the tracks. The Clarks got after them for years. So you can see the lumber up against the track. So number 6, Frank Frote's up in the cab, engine's heading for Westfield Avenue. A shot of 17 coming up from the Roselle Park interchange. I first got acquainted with Paul Carpenter's photography when the Whippany Railway Museum had the 270 tonners on display. Paul scanned some photographs and they had them up on the Whippany website, which is how I found these photographs and how I eventually got in touch with Paul. And some of these photographs have since made their way into some of my books. Tom Nemeth. So Tom Nemeth is a great friend of Tri-State, has given us a number of presentations, very prolific photographer, and is the editor of Rail Pace magazine. So in the 60s and 70s, Tom made a few different visits to the Rahway Valley and snapped some photographs. This is number 17, crossing North Michigan Avenue in Kenilworth. That a little hard to place today, but because there's a building in the background now. But 17's heading out to Monsanto, which is about a mile down the track through Kenilworth, to bring that very large DuPont car full of plastic for offloading. Another shot. This is 16 with a hopper car, early 60s. In the background, you can see Owenson Link's Rutland Combine, which he had stored there for years, restoring it, which much to the chagrin of George Clark, because he was concerned about who was paying the electric bill. Tom Nemeth shot early 1960s. This is in Kenilworth, right around the dead end of Fairfield Avenue. Those houses are still there. This is the Rahway Valley's western speeder, which still exists today. Has actually just been recently donated by John Nolan to the Tri-State Railway Historical Society, and is being restored by Eric Stenzel. Shot of 17 pre-Aldine plan, taken by Tom Nemeth. Engine is pointed west on the central. After they flip the interchange, when it's down the central, it would point east, which is how you can kind of date some of these photographs. Old Aldine Station, which is a freight office at this point, is in the background. And then off to the left is Haran lumber. This is probably one of the last photographs that Tom Nemeth took of the Rahway Valley. On the eve before the railroad was taken over by the Susquehanna, the railroad allowed some photographers to come down and do a photo shoot. So they pulled the 70 tonners out of the shop, got some lights down there, and they took some nice photographs of the 70 tonners. And another shot from that evening. I have to look up whose Mustang that was.
64? 65. Can't tell. Might be 65. I'm not sure.
All right, I think that's the last photographer I have in the queue. But I had the chance to meet Dan McFadden, who's also given Tri-State presentations. Another very good, great photographer, very prolific. Shot tons and tons of slides. His collection is quite immense and quite impressive. So he invited me and Rudy over one evening to look at his Rahway Valley and M&E slides and films, which were quite impressive. So here are Dan's slides of the Rahway Valley. So he chased a train in December of '74 from Aldine all the way to Summit. Curious thing, I've accumulated so much paperwork that I actually have the waybill for that boxcar in that picture. It's a carload of furniture for the Mart in Union. So this is coming up through Kenilworth. Those are the tracks heading into the engine house in the foreground. This is up in Union, same train, same boxcar, crossing Route 22. the eastbound lanes, and you can see the Rahway Valley's very safe, very noticeable crossing flashers activated here. In the background, you can see the old Union Drive-In. Heading further up the tracks, Dan McFadden's patiently waiting for the train in Springfield. Things are a little dead on this end of the railroad at this point, as evidenced by the lack of track maintenance and weeds. But there is a boxcar spotted up on the team track there behind the freight house. Number 16 slowly creeping its way up towards Mountain Avenue. And on the right was Best Pencil. They used to get boxcars of little cedar sticks to make pencils out of. And then further up the tracks, we're up in Summit. Dan McFadden shot. Number 16's up on Broad Street Bridge. The most lightly constructed of all the bridges on the Rahway Valley. George Clark did not allow the train crew to couple heavy loads up against the engines over this bridge, did not allow both engines to go across the bridge at the same time. It was only rated for 169,000 pounds. Occasionally, a heavy car would come in on the Lackawanna, and they'd have to be alerted to that, but not always. Old station is still sitting to the right. It's not long before it was torn down. The construction equipment stored there belonged to the Formicella family. Stored it there on a handshake agreement with the railroad. Interestingly enough, we found a letter of correspondence between the Formicella family, who had a house on Ashwood Avenue up against the tracks. Apparently in the 40s, a cinder from a Rahway Valley steam engine set Mrs. Formicella's clothesline on fire. So I don't know if the Rahway Valley allowed her son or whatever to store his construction equipment on the property as some sort of penance. Here's number 16 Underwire up on the Lackawanna. They were picking up that main central boxcar to head back east with them. They set one out and they picked one up, so a pretty light day. And it was pretty light at this point in the mid 70s for Lackawanna interchange. So the engine's probably tied down. The engine crew is probably heading up to the tower to get their paperwork. Dan came back in the 1980s and shot some more photography. This picture was taken down at Monsanto, which was the biggest customer on the Rahway Valley from the 1960s all the way until they closed in '89. Once they closed, the end was kind of on the wall, written on the wall for the Rahway Valley. But you see the big M Monsanto up on the water tower, the runaround track that they had constructed here. Prior to this runaround track being constructed, the Rahway Valley had to shove their cars the whole mile down the branch to get down to here. But in the mid 60s, they rearranged the tracks and made things a little easier. So Rahway Valley coming back with a loaded boxcar of plastic sheeting from Monsanto. That's Joe Ferry hopping off, Darren Famular up on the back pilot. They're about to flag North 17th Street in Kenilworth. That house still stands there today. Same spot, just a little earlier, as the train is coming around the S curve that went around Monroe Street. Train is heading east towards North 17th Street. Would never know this was here today. There's a house right on this spot. This is number 17 crossing the boulevard in Kenilworth. There's some hopper cars stored on the Volco siding, Volco Brass in the background. Volco didn't receive hopper cars, but they did have a very, very long siding that wasn't used too heavily by Volco. And the Rahway Valley didn't really have much of a yard anywhere. And Monsanto had a ton of cars that needed to be stored all the time. So Monsanto cars would be found all over the railroad, waiting for the Monsanto to be ready for them. And one of the popular hiding spots was the Volco siding. So that's what those hoppers are sitting over there. And then you see Joe Ferry flagging the boulevard. It's now the site of the Acme supermarket. Dan McFadden also returned in June 1980 for the golf train. So in 1980, the U.S. Open was hosted at the Baltusrol Golf Club. The Rahway Valley partnered with Union County's Trust Company to sponsor basically a shuttle train from Kenilworth up to Baltusrol. Parking was awful in Springfield for the event. So what they did is they had people park in Kenilworth. They brought them up to Baltusrol in the morning. On the train, they'd get off, the train would tie down, and in the evening, they would bring them back home to Kenilworth. There was food on board, there was booze on board, there was piano playing on board. It was quite the affair at a whopping 2 miles an hour. So this is the last run on the last day. It's about to leave Baltusrol way up the tracks there. This is the Van Winkle's Brook Bridge in Springfield. The bridge is still there if you go behind the Mizell Avenue field. That little pedestrian bridge, believe it or not, is still there. So you could place this pretty easily. And this is Dan's next shot. So number 17 in charge of the train coming back down through Springfield. 2 young kids looking on. The last time passenger train, this is the last picture of a passenger train ever to go through Springfield. That's Darren Famular sitting on the handrail there. And this is a cool shot that Dan took in the early 80s or late 70s. They did a flood control project in Springfield. Basically built this big basin there. So it kind of opened up this shot up. So you can see the Rahway River Bridge in the background. I believe they might have just crossed Mizell Avenue. But this is the golf train. So what they would do was only one locomotive was really pulling the train or moving the train. So number 16's on the front there, pulling the train, had a passenger car. 70-tonners don't have HEP, so you need to power the passenger car somehow. So there's a big generator in that boxcar to power the passenger cars. Was it 3 more passenger cars, and then 17 is just along for the ride. What they'll do is they'll get up to Springfield, they'll cut 16 off, shove it in the team track. 17 will then shove the train past and up to Baltusrol. 16 will follow behind. They'll tie the train down. All the passengers will get off onto a bus, head up to the golf course. Train will be tied down. They'll have Andy Dick babysit the train all day, make sure nothing nefarious goes on. And then the freight crew will take off in 16 and go do their freight work. And at the end of the day, they'll get a ride back up in a car to go hop on the other engine and bring the train back. So the last section, and then I'll open up for questions. These pictures are just for fun, just pictures I thought were funny. So this picture is probably the earliest just for fun picture I have. This is number 14 coming off the Rahway River branch. And Harry Williamson, the conductor, is thumbing his nose at the photographer. This picture, so number 12, after being in service for a year, was stored in Kenilworth for a very long time. Kids were always hanging around the Rahway Valley, little young rail fans, kids of employees, friends of kids' employees. They're all known to Clark. Clark let them do this. And number 12, being this big Park steam engine, was their big giant jungle gym. So Bill Young took this shot of his friends, Norm Kelting and Sharon Neese, hanging out of the cab of number 12, looking like real railroaders. And there's Norm Kelting and Sharon Neese again, hanging out the cab of number 12. Norm Kelting is sticking his tongue out at Bill Young. Bill apparently did not like the fact that Norm was ruining his photo with his tongue. So on the back of this picture, written in pencil, this is Norm Kelting. It's written. He is 14 years old, and his ambition in life is to become a locomotive. Nickname Blimpo. It was not all work on the Rahway Valley. In the 1970s, Stu Miller was working on the Rahway Valley as a brakeman, and they were up. I forget where he said they were drilling, but they were drilling somewhere, and these three ladies showed up near the tracks, and they offered to give them a ride. So while they were drilling in Union, they paused to snap this photo. So just a cool photo showing some of the goofing around that happened on the Rahway Valley. And speaking of goofing around, not only were there women along for the ride on the 70 tonners, there was also pirates afoot. In this photograph, number 17 is drilling Monsanto, and tucked under the marker lamp socket flap is a pirate hat. Track work on the Rahway Valley was very manual and very labor intensive, so you had to make it fun somehow. So this is the old International Wines Lead and Kenilworth, just north of the Parkway. That's Columbia Leather in the background. This is Darren Famular and Joe Ferry, very clearly very hard at work, fixing track here. And apparently Mr. Ferry swung too hard because the spike maul broke. And here's Darren Famular with the broken spike maul. That's Glenn Marsa in the background. Santa sometimes frequented the Rahway Valley. So I wanted to share this picture of Chris Kringle on his short stint on the railroad. In actuality, this is Darren Famular in the late 70s, feeling very festive. And here's Darren again, declaring that Santa is coming by way of 70 tonner instead of sleigh this year. This picture is Eddie Jones, Ron Petronowitz, and Darren Famular. Ron Petronowitz posted a copy of this picture years ago on my Facebook page and labeled it "On the Ground." They derailed one of the. This is number 16 here. Derailed somewhere up in Springfield, and they're kind of just hanging around. They called in on the radio for Harry Davis to come in and help them get them back on the rails. Here's another shot from the Gulf train. Like I said, the one locomotive on the rear of the train was just along for the ride on the morning trip up. So that's Darren Famular in the cab, thoroughly bored, not being the engineer and just going along for the ride. And for my last picture of the presentation, we have a picture here of Joe Ferry hamming it up for the camera. They're about to fly by that cut of cars past the switch. So it's a nice picture of Mr. Ferry, the chance to meet Joe Ferry, interview him, and scan his collection of photos, and get an interview of his time on the Rahway Valley. So that is the end of my presentation. That is what I call my best photo finds. So I certainly hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you liked it, please let me know. I'll try to do another topic on the Rahway Valley again. There's tons to choose from, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Question from George LaPierre: is the grading in the back related to the Aldine plan? If you're referring to the picture of that derailment, yes. In the background of Walt's picture, you can see the grading from the Aldine plan. So if you rewatch my show on YouTube, you can go back and you can see the unfinished ramp for the Aldine plan. Comment from Ray: the O. Winston Link Combine was from the Rutland Railroad, is now in upstate New York. Thank you, Ray, for that information. From Mark Charles: Buffalo Creek boxcars emptied by Levinson, usually loaded at Buffalo, New York, with grain from lake boats. Walt, do you want to comment on Buffalo Creek cars?
Well, there were several types of Buffalo Creek cars, apparently either by different builders or different groups because the doors were different on those cars. And also, besides the Buffalo Creek cars, you get Erie Lackawanna cars, which specifically were for food loading. And one time we got a Lehigh Valley 40-foot wrong way door boxcar where the door opened to the left rather than the right. So that was kind of an oddball. But you really saw anything, I'd say 80 to 90% of the stuff going into Levinson was always a Buffalo Creek car. And it was either, I think, 1400s up to 2000 something. So they had quite a few cars in their fleet. And they were naturally always in good shape because they hauled foodstuffs. So I guess that's about all I can tell you about those things.
Cool. Thanks, Walt. From Rudy, do any of the coaches in that golf special still exist? Yes. I'm not sure where all of them are. I do know that one is at Wharton Dyke Station, which Rudy, I'm sure you'll be passing in the few next coming days on your very special train. Another one of them, I believe, is in Honesdale. It was a C&J coach. We'll talk. Question, do you have any idea where the nickname Handsome for Jack Shallcross originated from, the reason behind it? I don't know the reason behind it other than someone probably thought he was handsome. For context, in the early 1900s, Jack Shallcross was a conductor on the Rahway Valley, was for several years. His brother, Joe Shallcross, worked as the Summit Station agent. And the Shallcross family lived in Kenilworth and still does live in Kenilworth. Well, Rudy wants to know if there'll be a definitive set of books on the Buffalo Creek cars on the Rahway Valley coming out in the near future.
No, I doubt that very much.
Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful compliments. I appreciate it. Question from Andrew Thomas. Who was the last customer before abandonment? That was Christie Enterprises. They're a plastics company in Kenilworth. They're a pretty small customer, not really too consequential, but after Monsanto went, they're one of the few left. And after they cut service to Jaeger 91, they were the only one left. What was the dome obs on the golf special? Looks probably ex-Burlington, maybe Wabash. It is ex-Burlington. I do have the name of it written down somewhere. I actually can look it up. Hang tight for a second. So, Rudy, to answer your question, I can actually probably tell you in a second where those cars are from that ran on the golf special. So, Mr. Thomas, the car, the Dome Obs, was Delaware Otsego System, Cooperstown and Charlotte Valley Railroad number 5, the Great Sac-Wendaga, XCB&Q 360, the Silverview, later Burlington Northern 1190, later Amtrak 9300, built by the Bud Company in 47 for the Twin Cities Zephyr. It's currently located at the Oregon Depot Museum in Oregon, Illinois, and is undergoing cosmetic restoration. Another comment, my wife and I grew up in Springfield on either side of the tracks. We often speculate on who was on the wrong side of the tracks. When did the train stop running? Up to Springfield, I think they ran up until 86. After Carter Bell stopped getting cars, they stopped delivering to Milburn Feed in Springfield proper. There was an incident where they stored the wire train from the Morrison Essex division on the lead of the Rahway Valley up in Summit. It got loose and ran down the hill as far as Carter Bell by Bryant Lake Park. And the Rahway Valley had to send an engine up through the weeds to pull the wire train down all the way to Aldine, where the New Jersey Transit picked it up. near XC Tower, which is a funny story. Rudy Garbely, oddly specific topic of the year award. Sounds like a challenge. The doors on the Buffalo Creek boxcar seen in the Rahway Valley between 1966 and 1967. There's a book heading your way, Rudy. Great presentation from one of 6 of Frank Frote's grandchildren who listened tonight. So thank you, the Frote family. I'm glad that you guys enjoy it, and I'm glad to be able to tell your grandfather's story. Are any Rahway Valley stations still standing? Yes, the only one left is Springfield. It's the only Rahway Valley building, period, that still exists. It's on Mountain Avenue in Springfield. It's currently a chiropractor's office. The chiropractor who is there, Dr. Hecht, is very aware of the building's history. He has some Rahway Valley memorabilia up on the wall. And if you're nice enough during business hours and you knock on the door and he's not too busy, he might just show you around. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful comments. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Be on the lookout. I'll probably do another one of these in a month or so on some other topic. Look on the Tri-State page or the Rahway Valley Railroad Facebook group for more information, or see what you guys are interested in for our next Rahway Valley topic. I greatly appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll see you next time. As far as Tri-State information goes, our next regularly scheduled meeting is next Thursday. We'll be having Mike Wickman, who is the first Tri-State president, attend to give a presentation. And for those who are on the Santa Train volunteers, we will be having our meeting on Tuesday, 6 o'clock. If you don't, or I'm sorry, 7 o'clock. Our regular pizza meeting, safety and job briefing. You all, if you're signed up as a volunteer, you all should have received an email about that. If you have not, please reach out to me, either at info@tristaterail.org or richie@tristaterail.org. We will get you that information. Or if you're interested in volunteering, please drop me a note. Happy to answer any questions. But thank you, everyone. Looks like all the questions have been answered. I hope you all enjoyed it, and have a great evening.